These prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about the 21st century are extremely shocking. Let's start by the first one. Muhammad said that the Arab Bedouins will compete against one another in building the tallest buildings. This is the most well-known prophecy that he ever prophesied, okay? But it's so shocking to say the least. Look at Saudi Arabia, look at the UAE, look at Kuwait, look at all these Arab countries. Just before the 1960s, literally in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, these deserted lands, the Arab Bedouins still existed. Like, these poor Bedouins never stopped existing. They existed even during the golden age of Islam. But somehow, in the 1950s to 1940s, oil was discovered in these countries. And basically oil is the reason why these countries are so rich to begin with. But who could have known in the 7th century that the same people who were walking around barefoot, that didn't have a shelter, didn't have a house, were nomads, would compete against one another one day in the future to see who could build the tallest buildings. If we look at the UAE, we've got the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world right now. In Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, they're thinking of building the new tallest building in the world. And then if we look even at Mecca, we have the 3rd tallest building in the world, the Clock Tower of Mecca. Now that we've talked about the 3rd tallest building in the world, which is in Mecca, it brings me on to the second prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he basically says that the mountains will be moved from their places. That same building was built where once there was a hill, a massive hill. And there's so many examples of mountains nowadays that are being destroyed to build tunnels, to build cities, to build buildings. In the 7th century, you couldn't even fathom moving those objects. So to even come up with such a prophecy in that moment, in that period, was just illogical. It didn't make sense to make such a prophecy, because no one at that time would even think of being able to remove mountains. This brings me on to the 3rd prophecy, which, bear in mind, this is shocking as well, and all of these prophecies will 100% shock you, like, no doubt. And Muhammad, peace be upon him, actually says this, that there will be an increase of sexual immorality and of disease. Disease as in coming from sexual immorality. Never in history has AIDS even existed. AIDS is a disease that is from the 20th century. Before the 20th century, nobody even heard, nobody knew what was HIV, AIDS basically. Nobody knew what it was. Diseases that in the past weren't even fathomable. Like, obviously you had diseases in the past that came from sexual intercourse, but we've never had in the history of human development, or at least of the humans in general, we've never had diseases like these before. Or at least we've never had such a massive spread of these diseases that come from sexual immorality. So this also is an incredible prophecy to have been made in the 7th century. Technically, if anyone prophesied this, even in the 19th century, okay, that also would have been quite shocking, because even in the 19th century, HIV wasn't a thing, AIDS wasn't a thing. So Muhammad, peace be upon him, was also correct with this prophecy. Now the 4th prophecy of Muhammad, peace be upon him, is this, that the hour will be close when the spread of interest will be so vast that those who will try to avoid it will be affected by its dust. Look at the 2008 crisis. Look at the 2022 recession. All of these things are caused mainly by interest. If we look at history, interest wasn't just seen as a bad thing by Muslims, but also by the church, for example, and in general by the whole of the human countries and cultures that they were in history. But it's only recently that interest has become such a popular and spread thing in the world. Like, everybody knew that interest was bad, or at least was immoral, unfair. Yet it's only in today's day and age that it is so vast that, just like Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, even those who try to avoid it will be affected by its dust. Isn't that so true? As I said, look at the 2008 crisis, look at the 2022 recession. All of these things are caused by interest at the end of the day. Now, this fifth prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, goes away from the 21st century, but also is quite shocking, to say the least. And it's the defeat of Rome and the conquest of Persia. As I said, this has nothing to do with the 21st century, but I thought it was while mentioning to put in this video, you know. As I said, this prophecy has nothing to do with the 21st century, but still, let's take a look at it because it's quite shocking. I don't know if you know this, but there's rules basically when doing prophecies. There are certain rules that you should follow if you want your prophecy to be correct, or at least to actually happen. The two main rules that you should follow when trying to make a prophecy is to not give a specific time and place. Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't care about this, obviously, as he went against it. He literally gave a specific time frame and a specific place in which Persia would defeat Rome. Not only did he give these two informations, but about the place where Persia defeated Rome, he would go on to say that that would be the lowest point in the whole of the area where they basically battled. That came true. I can't remember exactly how many years after it happened, but it happened in the time frame when Muhammad, peace be upon him, basically said it was going to happen. But the place was, it was spot on. Like spot on, completely spot on. Talking about this prophecy, it also brings me on to the sixth prophecy, which is where Muhammad says that he could see, through obviously God's will, he could see the red palaces of Persia and of Yemen and basically of Syria. At the time, these places were occupied by the Persians and the Romans, the two biggest forces in the world at the time. In fact, the historian Barnaby Rogerson was so shocked at the spread of Islam in the world, basically, that he compared the Muslims to the Eskimos as if they were to take on the USA and the USSR. Another historian, Andrew Louth, basically said that historians to this day still have no clue or explanation, basically, to the expansion of the Muslim world. So the expansion of the Muslims to this day is unexplainable. Like, historians have no clue how to explain such a thing. Now let's move on to the fifth or sixth, I can't remember, prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about the 21st century. And he says that there will be a prevalence of writing. At the time, nobody knew how to read or write, or at least those who knew were either people that had money, had power, so it was only people that had access to people who taught them how to read and write that could actually read or write. It wasn't as popular as we have it today. In history, before the 16th century, so before the printing machine was invented, writing wasn't so popular. In fact, there weren't many books written at the time, for the simple reason that not being able to print, it was quite difficult to write by hand a copy of a book several different times and sell it. First of all, because most people didn't even know how to read or write. And second of all, because writing in general wasn't a popular thing to do. It was only a set of people who did it. So this prophecy also is quite shocking because it may seem obvious to us to come to such a conclusion. But remember, he was giving such a prophecy in a time and place, especially in the Arab Peninsula in the 7th century, where writing was probably the least thing that was happening in that time. Writing was done by basically nobody at the time. Now, the next prophecy of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is also very shocking, where he says that the hour will be close when the Arabs' deserts will become green once again. Now, let me explain. First of all, at the time, the Arab deserts were just sand. And it's just recently that we've started to seeing meadows that are starting to come out in these Arabian deserts. Now imagine this. You're an illiterate man in the middle of the desert, prophesizing, about the future, and you randomly come out with an idea to say that the Arab deserts will become meadows and rivers once again. How unreasonable would it be to be in the 7th century and give such a prophecy? Like, to me, it would be so illogical. It wouldn't make sense. If I'm trying to create something just to have power, I'll make something, or at least I'll give prophecies that I just know are going to happen because I'm just sure of them. I would give prophecies that are so easy for them to happen. Now the shocking part is this, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, in this prophecy he says once again. To say once again, it implies that before there was this desert, there had to have been a forest. And as we know, only with today's science, technology and research, that the desert is just what remains of a forest, a massive jungle. So basically vegetation. To me, that's just extremely shocking. Like, you can't just read this or hear this prophecy and say, oh, it's just coincidence. No, it's not coincidence. He literally said once again, which implies that he knew that first of all, these deserts were forests before, obviously. But he also said that they would become meadows and rivers once again. And just in the last few years, have we noticed in the Arab deserts that meadows have started to come out. And as I said, there's multiple videos and photos that you can search for yourself, and you'll see that this prophecy is coming true in front of our own eyes, which is crazy. Now this last prophecy, which is also for the 21st century, is also extremely shocking. As I said, all of these prophecies are shocking, to say the least. And you can't just listen to them or read them and say it's just coincidence. Because to me, you'd be just irrational, to say the least. You'd be irrational to come to such a conclusion that it was coincidence. Muhammad, peace be upon him, says that Islam will touch every single house. Only in the last few years, even though Islam is being bashed by the media, have we seen a rapid growth of Muslims around the world. Islam right now is the fastest growing religion in the world, and there's a reason for that. The thing is this, we are now 1.9 billion Muslims around the world, and probably we're going to be even more. We may be 3 billion at some point, 4 billion at some point, who knows? And we're starting to see a massive growth of Muslims, of convert Muslims, in the West. I'm a revert myself, and I'm probably the first ever Muslim to have been in this generation, okay? Probably no one before me in my generation was Muslim, probably. And I'm the first one. Like, I'm just proving this prophecy right now. I am part of those who are proving this prophecy. So all these prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about the 21st century, although the Persia and Rome one wasn't really of the 21st century, but to me it was worthwhile mentioning, are extremely shocking. And if you are honest with yourself, and you're not Muslim, and you've watched this whole video and you've listened to all these prophecies, I ask you to be honest with yourself. How could this man come with such prophecies? Not only are they so accurate, but they also came true. How could you come up with such a prophecy? And I'll read them once again so that you just remember what prophecies I talked about. We've talked about the Arab Bedouins competing against one another in building the tallest buildings, mountains being moved from their places, the spread of sexual immorality and disease, the spread of interest so vast that those who try to avoid it will be affected by its dust, defeat of Rome and the conquest of Persia, the prevalence of writing, the greening of Arabia's desert, once again, and that Islam will touch every single house. How could this man even prophesy such prophecies?